Hello, good evening. I wanted to provide a little bit of an option for you of being able to do your progress reports and collecting data to make your life so much easier. I do a similar presentation for our teachers in our service unit, and one of the things that they always tell me is that this has made their life so much easier. Using Google to collect, record, and store your data is a really important process. And the reason that I say that is because it is one of the easiest methods that we can do in our classroom to record daily progress. And the nice thing is, if 4 or 5 people have access to it, then 4 or 5 people are having daily updates on all of the data. So we want to make sure that we have methods that are really in place to be able to provide good, strong progress reports. So I wanted to just do this quick presentation for you guys so that you see the benefits of using Google to collect and store data. I want you all to think about, and maybe some of you are brand new to teaching, but I want you to think about even what it was like when you were younger. And if you are um, young enough to not even know that you how to use this rotary phone, and I apologize for this portion, but for those of you that are old enough to understand this rotary phone, I want you to think about what it was like when you came into teaching or when you were younger, and how technology was so limited, and we had very few ways to actually collect data and do things like that. A telephone was about the only option we had. Then eventually came dial-up internet, where we had to go through the telephone line. I think I was telling my kids a story about that the other night, and they were laughing at me because that's a world we lived in. And so we've gone from this to moving on to all kinds of technology. And I think we have to just acknowledge that it is going to make our life easier if we allow it to. Yes, sometimes it can be a pain, but I think for the most part, it's going to make our life a lot easier if we allow it to. And I want us to embrace technology. And when we are talking data collection and progress monitoring, I want us to really think about how technology is going to help us and the role that data plays in education. That we want to make sure that we can actually think about how this role will help us. How can we use Google Forms to make your life easier? What is a Google form? Think about those kinds of questions. How does that help you? How do you make the amazing forms? Those are the things hopefully I can do for you real quick this evening and make sure that you have the ability to use Google Forms to help you save time. So exactly what kind of data are we talking about? When we're in education, there are two types of data that we really should look at in special education in general. We have our product data, which is our primary data, and we have our observation and conversation secondary data. So the data that I want to talk about first for all of our students is the primary data. So that's the data that we collect based on product. So that's going to be based on reading fluency, based on behavior, based on math problem solving, career interests, life skills data, any hard data that is from our goals and our progress that we want to monitor, that's our primary data. We want to make sure that we understand that that's our primary data. Then we also have some data that is secondary data. That a lot of times will come into play through behavior data. We have duration data, attendance data, organization, missing work, all of those kinds of data sources that we have. So knowing those two types of data helps us know how to organize it and how to get systems together to be able to support it. So I want to look first at the classroom data that you might actually gather in your classroom. If you look at all of these, this isn't even a comprehensive list, but there are so many data sources that we use as teachers that we use within the classroom. So we may have interviews with students, we may have reading records, life skill checklists, task completion lists, behavior lists, classroom voting, exit tickets, anything that we use in the classroom that we are gathering data on the product of. So we want to remember that these are the kind of things that we would gather. Personal growth data. This is something that I think a lot of teachers do not pay attention to. we have to remember that as teachers, we are also students every day and that we're growing too. So we have to make sure that we have some methods in place so that we can monitor our own personal growth. You may have the Marzano and the Danielson system. Are you monitoring your growth? Are you self-monitoring yourself? You may have your own assessments that you want on your own. You may get coworker feedback on your own methods. You may ask students for interviews. When I taught sixth grade, I actually did interviews with my students. Google wasn't really a thing at the time, so I didn't use that. But I wish I had it because I think it would have made it so much easier, and it makes it more anonymous because anybody can complete it and you don't have to log who's doing it. And so I think personal growth data is something to keep in mind. Then we have collaborative data. In our school systems, we have a lot of collaboration going on behind the scenes, or even it's something we do. So think of shared behavioral monitoring and how hard that is when you have a student and they go to high school classes and they have 5 to 7 classes a day, but you need to monitor your behavior data. This is a really great way to do that. Shared planning, it's very easy on a Google document to do shared planning. Co-teaching, team working, all of that sharing of data, this is where it would be very beneficial. If your school even did your MAPS or your state assessment data on a system, it would be easy. So we have to think about data collection and what our collection of this data should be, because we've got all those things that we need to know data on, but what do we have to look at to make sure we're planning the right system? We have to make sure, number one, that it's objective data. We have to make sure it's observable and measurable. We have to make sure that it's simple and it's going to be easy to read on the outcome part of it. We have to have multiple observers to increase our reliability. That's where Google is really critical because we're able to get multiple observers. And we have to make sure it's defensible. Do we have data that will defend that IEP that we have? Then we have to ask ourselves, well, what's my plan? How am I going to collect this data? How am I going to organize it? So we have to choose a design of what we want to do. We have to identify if it's frequency data, duration data, or if it's cumulative data. How can I measure this data? And does it give me the information I need? So not to say that a Google form is great for every single kind of data, but it is really good for certain types of data. So think about the design that you're going to use, whether you're going to use a binder, whether you're going to use Google, whether you're going to use just verbal data in your memory. That's probably not the best method, but some people do it. So the second thing you have to ask yourself once you have identified your design is who can collect this data? Where does the action typically take place? And who are the people that are around that action? So if the action is taking place in 7 to 8 classrooms, you have to ask yourself, who is the person collecting that data and who do I need to contact? Then the next thing you have to ask yourself is, does it take place in multiple settings? And how is it best to get across those settings and make sure that I have all this data? And then a final thing is, what is the quickest and easiest way to collect data and how you're going to gather this information? That is who can collect the data, where's it at? Then you have to select the data collection tool. Can this be easily accessible to parents? Could this be easily accessible to you as the teacher? Can it be easily accessible to your parents if they are able? Could it be easily accessible to the principal? We have to ask ourselves, can everyone access this data that needs to see it? Then do I have to compile the data from multiple sources? How do I get this together? How is this going to be easier to use? And then what is the quickest and easiest way to collect the data? So I want you to think about just a few examples. I'm going to use missing assignments. This is a really hard thing. When I was teaching sixth grade, this was one of the most difficult things for me. So when we have missing assignments, it's really hard to collect this data. We have to make sure that we are on top of that. So if students are able to turn it in and you do numbers or you do whatever, if you have a system to collect that data, you have a visual representation of what is not turned in. And that makes it so much easier as a teacher. Or you could display the spreadsheet up on the board of missing work. So finding a way to do that not only helps you as the teacher, but it also can help your students to be more organized as well. If you have life skill checklists, we do a functional vocational assessment that's on Google, and our job coaches complete that functional vocational assessment every time that student goes out to work. Then you have a spreadsheet, and I'm going to get into the benefits of Google in a little bit, but then we have a spreadsheet, and we can share that with everyone. I always used to be able to pull it up in the meeting if we had questions related to that student's ability and their progress. So we have to remember that first we have to choose a design that measures what we need to measure. We need to identify who's going to collect that data. Then we need to identify how we're currently doing it. Is it currently efficient? Then we have to build the tool. The nice thing is that if you have a system in place, you will not have data overload. So you have to think about this visual from Bernhardt. Think of the types of data that are in our schools and that we need. We have so many forms of data that we collect on a daily basis. We have demographic data, we have perception data, we have student learning data, we have school process data. These are all the things that we are in charge of our system to keep. So we have to remember that we're going to focus on this for our classroom for perceptions and student learning, but there are so many other data sources. So we have to really know how our system is in place and how we're going to collect the data so that we can monitor it in order to be effective and efficient. We also have to know, can we base our classroom changes on one particular set of data? I'm not going to show you the video, but there's a video on triangulation. And triangulation is a concept that essentially says that we should have observation, conversation, and product data. That we should have 3 different sources of data, at least, and types of data in order to make our classroom change decisions. I don't know that we often do that, but we need to remember that we have to triangulate that data. If we aren't doing that, then we don't have good decisions and bases to make our changes and decisions. We're also not providing parents enough information about their child, because it's not enough to just send home a reading fluency measure that the student has not grown in. We have to also say, these are the observations that I made. I've noticed that your daughter or son have been really tired. So that might explain the decline. We've got to add all those pieces to make sure that that comes up to a complete story, because our data should tell a story. So how does using Google Forms help us do that? How does it help us triangulate and tell that story? The forms are simple, they're intuitive, and they're incredibly easy to use. We can collect observation and conversation data by sending forms to other people. We can collect product data by filling out forms ourselves. So we have to remember that with one Google set, we can do that. So it is overwhelming, but why should we collect data? What's the purpose of our data and why is it important? We have to make sure that we lead to greater differentiation of instruction. If we know where our students are at all times and we have triangulated data, we can make better decisions in differentiating for our students. We can also monitor the differentiation methods to see what works the best. Then we could have greater collaboration among staff. Because if we start collaborating and talking to them and using Google, then when they have to answer behavior questions for us, it can be done very quickly. Sometimes that can strain our relationships if we don't have good systems in place. We have an increased sense of teacher efficacy. If we know where we're at any given time, or we can do our own self-monitoring, or we can even know where our students' progress is at and we are growing, then our students are going to be far more successful and we're going to feel better about it. So it increases our self-efficacy. We have improved identification of student learning needs. Kind of goes with differentiation, but it's also about accommodations. If we're actually monitoring this, we're going to have stronger accommodations for our students. Then we have stronger classroom management strategies. And the final one, because you have to, and progress monitoring is the law. So it is overwhelming, but there are a lot of ways we can do this. So how does Google make my life easier? You can use Google Forms to give quizzes, collect self-evaluations, collect document uploads, pull the classroom or other groups, allow your students to give feedback. For nonverbal students, this might be a really great way to do some surveys to actually get some feedback. Right now, we're working with a school on a young man that's on the spectrum. We are working with him to identify his interests because he can't identify them right now. And so we're working on a 1 to 5 scale within Google to be able to have him mark, I like this, I like this. And so we're going to start getting that and see if we can get that through because he's not able to express it any other way. We can gather information from other teachers. This is probably the best resource. I work on presentations with people across the state. You can work on anything at the same time. I can do behavior forms with 6 different people at the same time if I want to. So there's so many uses that's why I wanted to do this quick presentation for you on how to use it. So one of the benefits is that when you enter a survey in Google or you enter a form, you actually can get a spreadsheet. And I want to show you an example of a spreadsheet. This obviously isn't going to be related to your progress. This is just one that we did for a summer experience. And we had the people that worked at the summer location mark and rate our students. But the nice thing is all they did, there were 11 of them or so, 10 of them, and they entered their information on the survey, and I was able to create a spreadsheet with 1 click. So you have to remember that it's so easy to get this actual spreadsheet. So imagine if you were doing reading fluencies, or imagine if you were doing math fluencies, you were collecting your data on behavior. It automatically goes in here. It also gives you graphs. So if you want graphs, make it multiple choice because then you're going to get graphs. So it can give you all kinds of visuals. And if you want visuals to be able to report progress to your parents, if you do all behavior, if you do anything, you can get graphs like this. It'll also do some bar graphs. It'll do different kinds of graphs. So I highly recommend, if you want visuals, to start using this method. So it's really easy to do. There are a lot of videos online, very easy to Google how to make a Google form. But I want to give you a few pointers before we even get into that, because I'm going to show you how to create a form. So you want to share your link, not your form, with people. You want to check your sharing settings if you're going to share it with teachers. And you want to make sure to edit, and edit before sending. So I want to go out here for a second and show you. I'm going to show you my Google Drive. This is where I work. This is how I survive. You basically go over to New, and then you're going to go to More and create a Google form. So say that I was going to want to log the levels of behavior. So say I'm doing the zones of regulation, and I wanted to do the red zone, the yellow zone, and I wanted to do the green zone. And the blue zone. So I'm wanting to know what zone the student was in. And then, but I want to put the class. So this might be my zones across the day sheet. So this may be the day of the week. And then I would put all of them. And I might have the class. So then I might put the student's schedule in there. So I would put math, English, so I would put math and reading because maybe that's the only classes that I want to monitor that growth in. So then I have my form. So I would send it to myself, but I can view what it's going to look like. So it would be very quick and very easy for the reading teacher to mark it's Wednesday, it's in reading class, and the student was primarily in the yellow zone today. So what that does, and then we submit that. And say I want to submit another response. And I know that it was math class on Wednesday, and the student was in the blue zone. So then if I go into my form, I see responses. And I get a chart to show me that my student was 50% on Wednesday in the blue zone, which kind of oddly the colors don't match up. It'd be nice if you knew how that would work. And then 50% in the yellow zone. So I knew that maybe it was a little bit of a rough day. So it gives you the charting. But I can create that spreadsheet that will tell me exactly what I need. So you can imagine if you have 200 data points or 185 data points times however many classes you have, that's a lot of data to source out. So what you have to remember is that you easily can sort it by date, sort it by, okay, how many times in the yellow zone, how many times in the red zone. So it would put all my blues together, all my yellows together. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use this data, and it is incredibly helpful. I know that's an incredibly fast overview, but if you want to Google how to make a Google form or a Google survey, it's the same thing. And you would be able to do that, easily have access to your data. It's changed the life of a lot of teachers, and I think it's made a significant difference. So the biggest thing is I want you to think about when could you use this? How would you use it? How would this help your practice? And what is your favorite resource from this particular training? Will you use it? Because it is so important that we think about the methods of data collection that we have and the methods of progress monitoring and sharing that data. Keep in mind that Google can be shared directly with parents as long as it's on a confidential basis. So you do have to be careful and check your confidential HIPAA sharing everything, FERPA, not HIPAA, FERPA sharing and everything else. So just make sure that you have all those protocols approved by your school if you're going to use it and share it with parents. But parents could have a real-time access to the behavior. So this is just a really quick overview. If you have questions, please let me know in the private message forum.